Good morning, noon, or evening, viewers, depending on where you're listening from. Hope you're all taking good care of your well being and staying optimistic about our futures. A way to stay hopeful is to serve the communities that we live in today. There are several inspiring stories of people helping and caring for one another in a way that could not have been imagined before. It is precisely in this spirit that I would like to invite you today to listen to a conversation with a senior CSR leader and be inspired by her personal experiences and learn from her practical suggestions of driving the CSR agenda in your organization. This conversation is brought to you by the National CSR Network as part of our Heal with Hope at NCSRN project, where we would like to bring to you inspiring stories of how CSR leaders in India continue the great work that they have been doing even in these unprecedented times. The National CSR Network is an initiative of the Strategic CSR Alliance, comprising of industry professionals to assist companies in India to fulfill their CSR quotient in a measurable way and facilitate implementation of social and environmental development projects. Today, I'm privileged to say that we have Ms. Mamta Sekia with us. Ms. Sekia is a Chief Executive Officer of the Bharti Foundation that was set up in 2000. It is the philanthropic arm of Bharti Enterprises. With over 27 years of experience in the development sector, Ms. Sekia has worked on a wide range of societal issues such as rural education, sustainability, disability, animal rights, women issues, and HIV/AIDS. She has also served as the chair of the SAFRG and has been on the board of Resource Alliance UK. Mamta has been honored as the 2019 Influencer Leader by AACSB International. She was also among the 100 Women Achievers of India in 2015-16 under an initiative by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, which was facilitated by the Honorable President of India. She has also been awarded the Karmavir Puraskar National Citizens Awards for Social Justice and Action. Ms. Sekia, we are very glad to have with you today. So, can you please share the focus areas for the Bharti Foundation?
Um, Bharti Foundation was set up in 2000, and since then we have mainly focused in the field of education. We work with underprivileged communities, and we primarily work in the villages of our country. We work in rural India. In 2014, we, as a response to the clarion call given by our Honorable Prime Minister, we started work in sanitation, where we adopted the Ludhiana district, provided individual household toilets to people who didn't have toilets. And Ludhiana has been declared ODF, open defecation free now. We moved to Amritsar, and there also our project is on the verge of completion, a bit impacted by COVID now because you can't do final audits on toilets completed and all. But primarily, Bharti Foundation works in the space of education. And we have a two-pronged strategy on education. So on one hand, we have set up our own schools in the villages, over 180. These schools are primary schools, elementary schools, as well as there are 5 senior secondary schools in Punjab. Now, these schools are absolutely free of cost for underprivileged children. So, which means we've made sure that there isn't any entry barrier that stops a child from coming into schools. When I say free of cost, it doesn't mean that we don't charge fees. Of course, we don't charge fees. But we also make sure that we're giving them uniforms, we're making sure we're giving them test books, we're making sure we're giving them notebooks, midday meal, pencils, pens, crayons, erasers, everything that a child needs. So we made sure that there should not be any reason that a parent should hold the child back, at home. And these schools, we started this schooling program in 2006. It's been 14 years, and what a journey it has been. I think when when you actually run a project, it's very easy. It's very easy to say that 1.7 million schools in the country and government schools are not doing well. This is not happening. But when you run a chain of schools in villages with all the infrastructural limitations that are there, when you work with bottom of the pyramid, when you're working with underprivileged children and their related issues, then one realizes that what it means to deliver education and what it means, what it actually entails to deliver quality education. It's very easy to use this phrase. It's very difficult to deliver it in all honesty. We have worked hard, we have struggled, we have learned, we have failed, we have learned. We have we have listened to the ground, because I think most of the real wisdom actually not only comes from the community and parents, but very importantly, children. A lot of wisdom comes from the teachers who are actually dealing with issues. It has been a journey. And I think every year there's a new thing we add to our thinking. This year has been unprecedented. I don't think it'll take me another 2-3 months, even if I start compiling what have we been hit with, how much are we experimenting, and I think somewhere the DNA of Bharati Foundation, which was about innovation at grassroots. So innovation was not driven by head office. Innovation was not driven by program officers. Innovation was actually driven by teachers and our field staff. So once you have decentralized innovation, if Bharati Foundation, and I'm very proud of what our teachers have done, if we've been able, and I'll share that story with you at some stage, if we've been able to achieve what we've been able to achieve on the ground in last 2.5 months, it's only because innovation and ideation was decentralized. It was because there was a DNA of thinking on your feet. There was a DNA of resourcefulness. That's an attitude. If you're a resourceful person, under any circumstances, you will figure out, how do I deliver what I have to deliver? So one part of our strategy is our own schools, which are like a fountainhead of our learning. And what we do on the ground and what we learn from there, we take it into our other program, which is called Quality Support Program, which is where we work with government schools. And, when we work with government schools, we've realized we've earned a lot of respect from government school principals and teachers. There are two reasons for it. And this is something that one of the government principals said to me. He said, one, we know that you people are running your own schools. So you don't come to me with some solutions which are not practical. You have to run a school to know that how a teacher is already chock-a-block. That principals are already struggling for an extra period in a timetable. It is not easy to introduce new activities because your regular activities are taking up 8 periods, days a week, right? So they said, the second thing we like about your organization is that your solutions are practical, simple, doable. And when you're working in the field with village teachers, you have to keep your solutions simple. So the government school program also has been a very interesting journey, and last 2.5 months, we have been so much touched and surprised by what we've seen on the ground. And before I move on to tell you what all is happening, I would like to make this as my opening statement, and I've been constantly talking about it. Across the world, and I'm not talking India, and I'm not talking Satyabhati school teachers, across the world, teachers have actually risen up to the challenge of COVID. There are stories and stories. There are teachers who If I look at India, have we trained our teachers on virtual teaching? Of course, we haven't. And therefore, they're struggling, correct? They're struggling, but they're figuring out what to do. They're making an effort, right? One can go on criticizing that these virtual classes that they're taking are actually not virtual. They're making videos of themselves. Their classes are not engaging. But I'm touched and I'm inspired by the fact that there is a teacher, she has used the resources that she had. She has used the knowledge that she had, and she had decided that till the time a better solution comes, this is the way I'm going to reach out to my students. So I've been really touched by what teachers are delivering. They're working very hard. It's not easy to take classes, e-classes, online classes. The preparation is completely at another level. So a lot of gratitude and, thank you to the teachers across the world really for fighting COVID in the best possible manner.
I think that's great actually, Amanta. And in fact, I was just like picking up, on the piece on innovation and at the grassroots level, because many of the times you do have a vision to like accomplish something like really good. And I saw that you have about 180 schools, which is clearly a very very big organization by itself. So what are some of the challenges that you faced when you were trying to drive innovation? Because especially when you go to say the government schools, you do need to associate with the ecosystem, the panchayats, etc. So I'll be very curious to hear about your experiences on setting it up, and how did you really go about achieving the innovation that you see today.
Uh, First, you have to believe that human beings would like to do better every day. You have to believe in that, right? You have to believe in the basic human tendency or a trait uh, to think when faced with a problem, correct? What happens is, even if these things are given, there is a system which either does not encourage it, or there is a system which is overprotective, which means that don't worry, you have a problem, I've got these 5 solutions, do this, do this, do this. So what you do is, and it does happen, that you have seniors who have seen so much of the world that they are dying to tell you how to solve a situation, right? So as an organization, we knew that, and we're very lucky, we have some of the best team and best people, sitting in right kind of chairs. And uh, most of the time, they would know how to deal with a situation. So there was a very good balance. First thing was, don't think for everybody, correct? The delegation also has to happen not only in terms of responsibility and accountability, but also ideation, right? So we actually have a lot of structured processes which ensure that people are thinking, correct? So we have something called planning meeting. Now, in planning meeting is the time when the head office has to actually sit quietly. So they will run a presentation, but they've compiled the issues that were faced on the ground, because sitting in head office, hey, this state faced following 5 issues, this particular state following 10 issues. So you compile a list, and there is the field team and slice of various people coming in who actually sit there, form groups and ideate, right? So the solutions are not formed at HO. There is this annual planning meeting, which is a place where people actually come prepared with ideas, right? Because they know that your ideas will be listened to and your ideas will be implemented. So one is that organization has to very truly believe, if you want to set up a DNA of creativity and innovation, then you cannot do lip service to it. We created formal structures around it, and we make sure that actually there's no other way. You have to take ideas from the field. You can't sit in, not that our head office, people sit in head office, but they do travel around, but the best ideas actually come from the field. Second thing that we've done is, how do you take ideation up to teachers level? Because you see, teachers are actually facing children. your culture gets set like that. How do you make a child think? How do you make sure that a child is not mugging up the chapter, but you've given him, that DNA to think, to question? That will only happen if your teachers are thinking creatively. Very important that your teachers are experimenting, correct? We actually, uh, each teacher obviously is given certain funds for teaching learning material. There are trainings where we teach them how to create teaching learning material, but there is an award for innovative teaching learning material, which is something you were not taught, right? Let me give you an example. So this was a pre-primary class, right? And the teacher, she's actually one of the oldest teachers that we have. I think she must be past her retirement age, but she's so much childlike, that the school just doesn't let her go. So for alphabet recognition, you know what she was using? Keyboard. A broken keyboard. She went to the local, those shops which keep secondhand or broken items and they sell it. It was in such bad shape. I said, why didn't you ask us? We would have supplied you a, new keyboard at least, or better keyboard, because some of the alphabets were fading, frankly speaking. But to use keyboard, and how cheap it is. You go to a second-hand shop or you go to a Raddi shop, she got it so cheap. I was impressed. Her entire teaching learning material was made out of waste material, right? So the second thing is reward and recognition, correct? So there was a class on phonics, and you know what a teacher said? All children, they know, you know your names, right? So I entered the class and every child is wearing the phonic of his or her name. So easy to teach phonics because you know your friend's name also, right? So I think two things. One, if you're saying innovation has to be driven, you have to make structured places where you encourage ideation, take those ideas. Um, you have to accept failure because not all ideas will be successful. So you have to make sure that everybody in the organization to the last mile understands your vision and understands the boundaries. No idea can cross the boundary, right? So once you know that a child will not be harmed, the loss to organization reputation will not happen, the loss to resources will not happen. Once you've set those boundaries, very important is vision connection. Then you see ideas bloom. And you have to be ready for things that don't work out and be cool about it.
That's great, Mamta. I think that's really good because, and I think even the story of this teacher is very inspiring because it really goes on to say that in each of our roles we can truly look for ways to improve ourselves. So I think that's absolutely great, and it's obviously even about making building a culture where where the teachers, where everyone like really are able to put in their best. So, could you tell a little bit about how the Bharti Foundation is structured for the benefit of the viewers? Because you have such a large setup. So, like for example, how big is your team that you work with, and how have you managed to really build this ecosystem of NGOs that may have helped with, or the teachers? So, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Bharti Foundation itself is an NGO. We are an implementing organization. So everybody, every teacher is on our roll. There are employees. So we're nearly 2,500 odd people, including the teachers. We have a board, and we have a board which has obviously specialists, finance, communication, development people, and we have a very inspiring board. So they don't just meet twice or thrice a year. They actually actively pick up a theme and they work with me and my team to make sure, so for example, there's one board member who's helping us develop a framework for a government school program on how do we evaluate its impact. We have another board member. She's been Kalpa Morparia. She's been working with us on taking technology in for last 3 years. So each board member actually picks up a theme and works with us. We're under the direct mentorship of Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal. And He, I think, lives, breathes, sleeps education. For him, underprivileged children, girl child, and teachers are very important, you know. And uh, I think one thing that I've learned from him is, so whenever I would sit in a meeting with him and there are field people, I don't even speak because I know that he gives so much importance to what field has to say. That I, along with the HO team, we normally keep quiet. So I think this entire, perhaps the DNA of listening to what the field has to say has been really, set up from the top, that listen to the ground. So we have our board. Then we have our head office where all the strategic functions are there. So we have a school excellence team, we have a program team, we have a communication and partnership. We also have a construction department because we construct and maintain our own schools, finance and HR and functions like those, legal. Um, then are the field level, our soldiers, foot soldiers, really. They're led by regional heads. And then we have academic mentors, cluster coordinators, trainers, people who are actually working with schools and teachers to make sure that initiatives are implemented. The last set of employees are obviously our teachers, and post that are parents and children. So that's how, if I have given the structure, you being an HR person.
Okay, thanks, because it's always good to really set that up actually. And in today's unprecedented times, there are. Obviously, you're not able to make as much of face-to-face interactions with social distancing. How has that shaped your initiatives? Have you had like a different ways of managing it? So I think we'll be very interested in knowing your views on that.
So it was almost like when this COVID happened, within 48 hours, it was like there were 1,600 horses pulling the cart. We have 1,600 teachers, right? The speed at which they started. So that's what I'm saying. There are two, three things worked for us. First was this DNA of we have a problem and we have to think of a solution, right? So everybody got into problem solving mode. Second thing that worked for us was that we're very lucky. Our teachers are very committed and passionate. Very, very, I mean, they're a joy, right? I find equal amount of passion and commitment in government teachers as well. But these teachers, we connect with them on, even today, I speak to every week, I speak to at least 10 to 12 teachers a week, right? I get them on the call. The calls are obviously organized. I listen, talk to them about their families and what all is happening with students and like that. We, in any case, had a very good program of not only teachers are very engaged with children. You pick up a child and they will tell you the entire story of family and everything, right? That much engaged they are. But the second thing that worked with us was that we had a very strong program of Parent Connect. Okay, so it wasn't as if our teachers were struggling for phone numbers, right? And the lockdown was announced like this, that there is lockdown. None of our teacher had to go to school to pick up the phone numbers, right? That shows you the connection. So that worked for us. We were not struggling to reach out to our children or our parents. The second thing that worked for us was, and which is something most of the education schools are now learning, we had realized many years back that parents have a very key role, especially in the education of underprivileged children. It is not important whether parent himself is literate or not, right? So we had actually started long time back something we call home mentoring program, where we actually train a parent on how to mentor a child. So you may not be able to teach what the child is studying, but you will definitely balance that child's time to make sure that he's going out and playing, he's watching TV if he wants to, he's onto the phone if he wants to, but there is this much of time that will be spent on studying. We train teachers on We trained our parents on how to find out how much homework has been given or what are the tasks. You have, so we had a home mentoring program. So our parents were already trained, connected with teachers, and they knew their responsibility. And I just don't know, surprisingly, last year something we started called phone PTMs. Okay? And no, it is not PTMs on phone. It was PTMs where parents were trained on how to use phone as a educational tool. So all parents used to, so 70% plus parents had a smartphone, whatever be the quality. And we were very lucky that we had Khan Academy going for us. Hello English has been kind enough to give it almost free of cost to our children. There was ENY. So there were a lot of, apps that are free and available to children. Would you believe it? Since last year, we have had 3 phone PTMs, which means all the parents were called in thrice for a training on how to use mobile phone. Right? And again, it's an idea that came from some teacher somewhere, right? And obviously somebody gave that idea and it was a brilliant idea and we were using it in our schools. So we were lucky. The interest, if you have commitment, motivation, and attitude to solve problem, your parents are connected, you have their phone numbers, and you've done phone PTMs. We were on the go. 48 hours, our teachers were, in a way, back into classroom, right? So we actually, so first we had a phase one, which is called gather and start. Okay. In that phase, every teacher set up a WhatsApp group for every class. So school A, class 1, school B, school A, class 2, class 3, all parents groups are formed separately. And our teacher said, unfortunately, COVID happened in March, and you know that in India, most of the academics year start in April, right? So the new books hadn't been given. Many schools were still in the middle of their final exams, summative assessment. So we knew that our children are back into their houses with old books, correct? So the first thing our teacher said, we have to make sure that they don't lose the learning levels that they've acquired. Right? Because long holidays, long stay at home can actually make these children, lose the learning levels. So the teachers started working with existing books, existing workbooks, right? And our holiday homework was already ready because holidays were about to come. So they started giving assignments from holiday homework. And I asked one of the teachers that parents who are not on WhatsApp, what are you doing? Suddenly from day 3 or day 4, I started getting, screenshots. There is a parent who is saying, ma'am, the child has done this assignment, photo of the assignment and sending it to the teacher. And teacher is checking that assignment on WhatsApp. So I said, I asked my team, I said, so what are they doing about parents who don't have WhatsApp? He said, can you believe it? They are calling up those parents and they are telling them what is to be done and they talk to the child through the phone. The effort it takes. And our teachers are still doing it. And do not forget, these are village women. Almost 75% of our teachers are women teachers. Women teachers in villages, families are still joint families, which means they have the responsibility of making sure to look after the elders in the family, their in-laws. They have a lot of other responsibilities, correct? And for a woman or a daughter, even a male teacher, to be on phone all the time is very difficult, right? So they took out the time. So our phase one was gather and get go, right? So they started using what was available and they started teaching. While this was happening, our academic cell was getting their act together, right? Because we were getting ready for a worst case scenario that what if, the lockdown doesn't open and what if it becomes a little extended lockdown? Initially, of course, everybody didn't know what it would mean. So they, on one hand, started looking at other online resources which were available. So we've tied up with Central Square Foundation, TikTok. So they started looking at Deeksha, they started looking at YouTube. So they were compiling and curating the content that was there. And then they started looking at existing books to say, how do we start building on the concepts of next year using the books that you have? You can ladder approach grammar, correct? And suppose for next year you have to do uh, two-digit divisions and things like that. They said, okay, let's make sure the current concepts are strong so that when we transition them to next concept, they get it quickly. The amount of work the academic cell did to make sure that the current workbooks and current books can be used to give them practice for key concepts, but also to slowly start getting them ready for the next class was amazing. And then that phase got launched around a month back. And if I may take one more minute, the challenge was currently teachers are doing what they can. So our teachers, and that's why I admire it. She had this little whiteboard. There's so many videos. She's making a video teaching, and she has to make only small videos because data is an issue. Correct? So she's making small videos, she's sending it. They're also sending videos from YouTube nowadays. So I was talking to a child the other day. So I'm connecting with children also to find out, what is their emotional well-being and how are they feeling. So this child says, when I get a video from my ma'am, I feel very good because I feel I'm back in the class. Right? Because they're getting some other videos also from YouTube, but children still appreciate that little video made by their own, ma'am. It became very important for us to train these teachers, right? So far, they were doing it with, how they thought was the best way to do it. I have a feeling our time is up. No? No. We still have 15, 20 more minutes. I'm so sorry. So then we realized we can't do very long trainings. We can't get these teachers to be sitting for a 2-hour session even because they have to teach children also. They have to look after their families, food and everything. You know what our trainers did? So suppose there is a whole module on, let's say, lesson plan, how to create a lesson plan, right? They would break this module into 15 to 20 small modules, right? 3-4 slides, sometimes with a voiceover, sometimes they are self-explanatory, and they will make a group of 7-8 teachers. So they will handle 10 such training groups together, right? 60-70 teachers in one go. They will release this 4-5 slides. Teachers, when they have time, they say, okay, now you have 4 days. Okay, go through this module, ask me questions. Now in various WhatsApp groups, whenever a teacher has a time, she has a question, she goes through, she asks a question. Trainer is available and answering the questions. On the 4th day, he does a quick 10-minute call with each group to sum it up. Once that he sums it up, he launches module B, right? So we have to, we had to do this because time is at premium and you can't have teachers, and we had to get them ready for virtual teaching. So a very interesting, very, very interesting phase, Madan.
I can imagine, Mamta, because this is listening to you makes me feel that you have been working in the world of possibilities rather than the world of adversity. And I think the attitude, the examples you shared about your teachers, going that extra mile using technology like WhatsApp, the Khan Academy, etc., to really create that. I think those are great examples. And what also struck me particularly was the fact that with your photo. With your phone PTM, you already were in a way prepared for what was to come. So it's almost, so you did say that you were
Really?
lucky, but then probably it was
Yeah.
not lucky. You were really prepared for it, and that idea really came from the teachers. So great. So thanks so much, Manta, for joining us. Would you have any quick, like message that you want to give to the viewers? In terms of how they can really plan, drive the CSR agenda in the coming weeks and months?
I would, but I've left out a very important segment, that's government teachers, because I've been only talking about our own teachers. And I have been so much impressed with the kind of work government teachers are doing. I mean, they're going home to home delivering books. They're going home to home delivering midday meal grain. I know of some government teachers who I was attending a presentation. You know, they have actually taken panchayats, public address system, and every day there are teachers who take 1 hour class, so the entire village listens to it. You know, so they're not even looking at my school children. They're saying, as a teacher, I'm responsible for the children of my village. I mean, the stories are inspiring, Madan. What we've seen teachers do, what we've seen government teachers do is amazing. So I just, before we move on to CSR thing, I just wanted to say that uh, even government teachers, I know that I'm emotionally connected with Satyabhati school teachers, but government teachers have been equally inspiring for what they've done. I also know of government teachers who are, I've heard it on a webinar. I don't know of teachers, that they are in open space. They're getting 4 or 5 children together to take, some local classes. So there is immense amount of work that's happening on the ground. Coming to CSR, with COVID, most of the organizations, and there has been a recent study from CRISIL which says that a large percentage of CSR funds are being committed towards COVID, and rightfully so. Our world needs it. Our world needs as much support. There are poor people who are not, would struggle for food. There are poor people who would struggle for medication, things like that. In addition, there is work that NGOs have been doing, which also needs to be carried out. So, do we need to run schools? We need to run schools, right? Children have to be given education. There are NGOs in education space. It will not be, it's just that the entire world needs extra resources. And therefore, there would be a phase where each one of us may feel that I'm not getting the resources that I needed for my job. But that is where I think the power of us human beings to find, if I may use this word, to find magic within us to do much more than, with the limited resources that we are getting in. This situation actually demands of us to go beyond our capabilities, to pick up every single paisa, every single rupee that we get, and to make it work many times over. Right? So, of course, it'll be a challenge. Nobody can have a solution there isn't a magic wand which say, hey, you go to this place and you will get funds. It will be about making sure that you use your resources creatively, smartly. It will be a lot about collaboration. Now we can't do projects which are duplicates. We can't have more than one organization working in a space, in a geographical space. We have to talk to each other to say, you're doing this much, I'll build on what you're doing and I'll go an extra mile. Our resources will become large because we will pool in our little pieces. So we'll have to actually learn new ways of working, and honestly, again, not just saying collaboration, actually collaborating.
Thanks, Mamta. I think those are real good pearls of wisdom, if I may. To really shape our attitudes and again look at the world of possibilities about collaboration, about stepping it. And this is where human potential truly comes in, isn't it? Because at moments of crisis, many of the times, have we have risen to the occasion, and this is quite unprecedented. It's a global crisis, but I'm sure we will come out of that, with kind of stories that we have heard. So thank you so much, Mamta, for joining today. And dear viewers, let's thank, Mamta, and also very importantly, let's actually spend a couple of moments to think about the teachers and the excellent work that they are doing. in terms of shaping the minds of like our children, because these are the citizens of the future. And I think the work that they do is so important, it's good to just just clap our hands and wherever we are, and just salute to them for the excellent work that they are doing. So we hope that you found this conversation very useful and inspiring. And if you do want to know more about the National CSR Network, please do check out our website. And thank you so much for joining today. And we hope to bring you more conversations like these in the future. Thank you.